Hello, friends. Welcome to Science Talk. I am your host, Jim Masso. So, as you can see here, I want to discuss with you how climate change is affecting the biodiversity at the poles. And we have a nice picture of a seal here. And so, now when you look at the conditions in the polar region, organisms that live there and thrive there have to really have special adaptations. And in a warming world, in a changing world, loss of ice, and so on, those adaptations that serve them so well in harsh, cold conditions may actually now end up being their undoing. I mean, look at polar bears as an example. They need the sea ice in order to hunt seals. In fact, their scientific name, Ursus maritimus, basically translates as sea bear. Okay? But they can't keep continuing to swim in the ocean because the cold waters, no matter how thick their blubber is, will sap all their energy out of them. They need the ice to hunt seals because it's easier to catch the seals when they poke their nose through a breathing hole to breathe. Seals can swim faster than polar bears, so polar bears wouldn't be able to catch a seal in open water. And even if it did, where's it going to drag it onto land to ingest? That's just one example. So we got climate change. It's warming the oceans. It's melting the ice. Weather patterns are changing. So will the organisms be able to adapt, or will they perish? Well, it's happening so fast that I don't think the organisms are having enough time to adapt. So that's going to be the undoing, because the rate of change is so fast. If this is happening slower, yeah, they probably would have time to adapt. So here we have looks like Adelie penguins, having a little walk on the ice there. Okay. So we have Dr. Stephen Chown, who is a professor at Monash University in Melbourne, suggests imagining you are a Adelie penguin, Pygoscelis adeliae, swimming along on the ocean's surface, and you're nice and warm in your feather and blubber suit, and then you see a bunch of, this is him painting a scenario. You see a variety of seabirds in the skies above you, albatross, skuas. You got whales, seals, fish, krill in the oceans around you. You take a little dive to the seafloor, and there's an ecosystem that's flourishing with all sorts of life forms. And you've got bryozoans, corals. Maybe you have DC hydrothermal vents with the yeti crabs on the edge. Got microbes doing their contributions. And a recently discovered form of microbe basically ingests methane. Methane tends to be released from the hydrothermal vents. So methanogens are not unknown to scientists, but this sounds like a new form that's been recently found. And it's been found in the Arctic versus the deep sea hydrothermal vents that, for example, in the Juan Fuca region and so forth. So to me, it sounds like a new species. Antarctic seafloors are diverse in some tropical areas. Now you hop on the land with the penguin, and not much to see. Piles of ice and snow. No terrestrial birds, no land mammals, no reptiles, no amphibians, no trees, no shrubs. You might come across green or pink snow. Snow algae. I just did a recent video segment discussing ice algae. Or maybe the two species of flowering plants that actually thrive on Antarctica. The Antarctic hairgrass and the yellow-flowered moss-like Antarctic pearlwort. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a photo of krill. Krill, this is what a lot of the baleen whales feed on. When you think of the biomass productivity of krill, that's an immense amount of biomass that supports an immense ecosystem. The Southern Ocean is the most productive open oceanic ecosystem on the planet. And you have krill by the billions of tons supporting all the organisms that feed upon them. So there's some microbial activity on land, as you would. I'm sure that does not come as a surprise. As the ocean warms, and what's interesting, some of these microbes can combine hydrogen and oxygen and make water for themselves. That's really cool. As the ocean warms, many of Antarctic species are already changing their habits. Adelie penguins, seals, and krill are all moving south to colder parts of the continent. The plant species we just discussed, they're becoming more commonplace. Dr. Chown is also worried by the increase of foreign species that are now establishing themselves in Antarctica, such as grasses from other parts of the world that inadvertently get introduced via research, travel there, that kind of stuff. So we have Arctic invaders. Here's some icy waters near the North Pole. Right? Here's the sun, here's the North Pole. Typical view. At the other end of the Earth, Arctic community and scientists have seen similar situations and similar concerns. The Arctic is warming at least twice as fast, some say 3 times fast. Record high temperatures recorded during the northern summer heat waves. We're now seeing more temperate species moving farther and farther north. I've done numerous videos of discussing how oceanic organisms are moving to higher latitudes to escape the warming waters that they can't tolerate. And so you have tropical species, they're moving to subtropical, subtropical moving to subpolar, subpolar moving to polar. We're seeing this displacement because they're trying to find the temperature that agrees with them. If you're an aquatic organism living in the water, it's a lot more, because you're surrounded by water and specific heat of water, it's a lot more difficult to find that comfort zone where the water temperature is not too high, where it burns you out metabolically. And that's what a lot of them are facing. So that you end up not growing because your metabolism is so fast, you can't put the energy to adding tissue. So you start moving off. If you're on the land, yeah, conditions favor for like plant species to move north. But if you're a land animal and it gets too hot, you can take a dip in the water. If it's too cold, then you can get out in the sun and bask in the sun for a bit. So it's a little easier for land organisms to thermoregulate versus aquatic organisms. So Dr. Jen Lento is a researcher at the University of New Brunswick. Says what's happening now, what we're expecting to see more of in the future, is a loss of that biodiversity that's very specific to the Arctic. And he led a first ever circumpolar assessment of Arctic freshwater biodiversity. It's going to start look more like temperate region, and we're losing those unique ecosystems we currently have. Arctic char, that's what this is a photo of. Salvelinus alpinus is a relative of salmon and trout. It has a bright red underbelly. One there, I wouldn't call it red, but it's bright. It's a very critical food resource for many indigenous people. It's declining. Now, char, Arctic char, salmon, trout, they prefer cold water. Of course, cold water can have more dissolved oxygen in it, but they prefer cold water. Waters are warming, it's not very good for them. Other species that aren't as sensitive or don't require the cold temperatures are starting to move in. So you're starting to see higher abundance of trout and other fish that will compete with Arctic char, and that you could potentially end up with high biodiversity of fish, but it's a loss of those fish that are important. Okay, so basically what she's saying is that you could have trout moving in that will displace the char, even if they're both the members of the order Salmoniformis, and let's see, trout would also be members of the genus Salvelinus as well. So they're both in the same genus. Fishing practices are changing as well. And Dr. Lento recalls visiting an Arctic village where a community member told her that in the past they could set their fishing nets Leave them for a few days because any fish they caught will be preserved by the cold waters. Now they have to check them every day because the water is so warm, the fish aren't being preserved so well. Here's a cute photo of a nice little Arctic fox. They are cute. They're very nice insulating fur, and they live in the Arctic tundra landscapes. Thawing permafrost. Soil, which is permafrost is soil, rock, sand bound together by ice that remains frozen year-round, is also impacting Arctic biodiversity communities. Water has less volume than ice, so when permafrost melts, now this is referring to the ice portion, the soil, rock, sand portion would thaw out. So when the ice portion melts, it creates a depression known as a slump or thermal karst. And these are features that are common across the Arctic. The impacts of these on freshwater lakes is huge. You get basically this mud slurry. It's actually what's called liquefaction that runs out from the thaw slumps. And these streams that were previously clear now have this, basically, it looks like chocolate milk. This is bad news for fish such as char that lay their eggs in such locations because the eggs need clear, clean water. You now put basically the silt in there. The silt will it's, first of all, it's not clear, but it's going to cover the eggs, clog them. It will kill the eggs. You then have increased egg mortality. This will affect ear class strength of the fish when they hatch out. If they do, some could be 100% wiped out. So this is going to be deleterious for fish eggs there. The Arctic has also experienced record-breaking wildfires over the past 2 summers. Yes, this is natural, but is now occurring at unprecedented scale. We've seen fish mortality, says Edward Alexander, who co-chairs the indigenous representative group, the Gwich'in Council International. Gwich'in tribe is found, in Alaska, into the Yukon, so forth. Some of the rivers got so warm that the fish died before they spawned. We're seeing new insects. We're seeing a prevalence of unusual species. Over time, scientists believe these outside burns could precipitate a shift from coniferous forests, the spruce trees, more to deciduous forests that are found further south. Now, for deciduous trees to take hold, they need a deep root system. So that is a further ramification of the thawing permafrost, because now more deeper and deeper into the ground thaws out. That allows the trees to establish their roots. As been seen in landscapes across the globe, when elements of an ecosystem are transformed, the system functioning changes in ways we can't predict. Losing species matters in and of itself as well. Some of the most iconic animals are starting to become very stretched in their capability to deal with the change. Emperor penguins are expected to be extinct by the end of the century if we don't do something. Imagine a world with no emperor penguins. I just did a segment about how climate change is imperiling the emperor penguin because they're losing the sea ice they need to breed on. So this is not a hyperbolic statement. So what's the take-home message from all of this? Arctic polar species that evolved, the Arctic or Antarctic, polar species that evolved for those what have been typically stable, harsh, what we call harsh conditions for the past, tens of thousands of years. The ecosystem is changing due to climate change. It is endangering these species. It is threatening them. But it's also allowing, because the conditions are not as harsh, less severe, relaxing, if you will, it is allowing a migration of flora and fauna northward, or let's just say from lower mid-latitudes to higher latitudes. You can have the same thing going on in Antarctica, especially moving closer to the Antarctic continent itself. because that's where the colder waters will be found. So you're going to have this movement of flora and fauna to higher latitudes, which could displace the organisms that are already found there. Many of the organisms found there that adapted to a certain condition are finding themselves in danger because the sea ice is disappearing, or it's too warm for the fish to make their spawning run, or you have siltification killing off the eggs that are laid. So you have all these things going on that, yeah, you may end up with a more diverse ecosystem in terms of species found, but at what price? At displacing what the species that have been there for millennia. So species diversity is changing, but it's not good news for the species that have been there for millennia. They are in danger. And in fact, we're seeing one of the things mentioned is that a changeover in the trees. So you can't even call it you won't be able to call it a boreal forest anymore because it might have deciduous trees. So the changes are coming. Species already established, it's not good news. Thank you for your time. Hello, folks. This is Jim here with Science Talk, asking you to please subscribe to my channel and to inform others of my channel and of the work that I do. Please share to social media platforms that you use. Also, as a reminder, don't forget to click the bell so that you know when I load up more videos. Finally, I ask that you support the work that I do by becoming a patron at patreon.com. Details in the description box below. Thank you for your support.